So we just had the 2025 general elections in Jamaica, and unsurprisingly, there are mixed feelings about the results of the general elections. The Jamaica Labour Party won 35 seats, and the People's National Party won 28 seats. And the sentiment across Jamaica, unsurprisingly, is split across party lines. In 2025, it is very disappointing, and that's a generous word to use, that the tribalistic nature of Jamaican politics still persists. We would think that with a new generation of voters, we would have a more Jamaica focused approach when it comes to how we exercise our right to vote. There are a few contending issues that are at the forefront of the political debate right now, arising from the general elections. And the first one, I think, and the most controversial, is that most Jamaicans believe that Prime Minister Andrew Holness did not win his seat. I too share that sentiment. I know persons may disagree, but at the end of the day, the optics and the things that were happening on election day raise questions in our minds as to the legitimacy of that seat. There is also the issue of hiccups, and that's another generous term that I'm using, on election day, where persons were spending 1 to 2.5 hours in line just to cast their vote. The excuse that the electoral official gave is that there were persons who showed up with invalid IDs or persons who showed up that did not have an ID. And there is this lengthy process that they have to go through in order to get the person to vote. So they had to swear them in, they had to take an oath, and a bunch of stuff. And it begs the question, there had to have been some sort of anticipation that persons would show up who didn't have an idea or what the expired ID, and then how you're going to account for that. To the extent that persons were allowed to wait in line until one person take 25 minutes to get sworn in did not make any sense to me. Because if somebody shows up and they don't have an ID or their ID is expired and you have to go through this process that you know is going to take anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, why would you then have the people in line wait until that process is completed? That does not make any sense. If it's one person, then that is understandable. But if you have several persons showing up without IDs or whatever, then it would stand to reason that you would have a member of staff deal with the swearing-in process for those persons, and then you can just put them, they will be next in line once the process is completed, but you would keep the line flowing so as not to unduly inconvenience the rest of persons that were there. So that was a bit of a red flag for me. Cliff Hughes on Nationwide was interviewing Glasspool Brown. I think he's the director of elections, right? And he was asking about why is it, because it has been the practice that if you show up on election day to vote and you are in line at 5 p.m. when the polls are supposed to be closed, once you're in line, you would be allowed to vote. And reports are that an overwhelming majority of persons who were in line on or before 5 p.m. were not allowed to vote. And that is not in keeping with the general practice of what normally happens on election day. And there is no explanation proffered as to why the practice was abandoned. And the director of elections had said, was asked, I watched it on TVJ News, their live coverage of the election day results, where he said, yeah, as long as you're in line, at 5 p.m., you will be allowed to vote. So I am not sure why that was not followed through on. There is no explanation proffered to date, at least not that I am aware of. Any reasonable explanation given as to why persons were not allowed to vote. So that again, is sort of making the results of the election looks questionable, right? Then there is I think the most viral issue coming out of the election is the East Portland constituency, that was contested by the incumbent Anne-Marie Vaz and the PNP Isaac Buchanan. And Isaac Buchanan won that seat. And this will form the general thesis of this video. That is what I come to talk about, because when I saw the results, I was surprised. I'm like, how did Isaac won that seat? It doesn't make any sense. And most Jamaicans were also surprised and concerned, and they were raising questions, and we're like, Portland, East Portland, you guys need to come to the front of the class. You guys need to explain to us what happened with the seat. How